Families who lost their loved ones to police officers' deadly force are suing. Not the departments, not the police officers, but the agency that handles these investigations, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. The families say they haven't been able to access the evidence that the BCA collected months after these investigations were actually closed. Again, these deadly force cases didn't result in criminal charges against police, but Kent, these families, they have a lot of interest in seeing those case files.
Yeah, they do, Jana, because while it is extremely rare for deadly force, use of force cases, as we know, to result in criminal charges against officers, we have seen numerous wrongful death lawsuits and settlements with families. But these families say their window to file any kind of lawsuit is shrinking because months after their cases were closed, they're still waiting to see the evidence. Just days after Tekle Sundberg was shot and killed by Minneapolis police snipers following a 6-hour standoff in July of 2022, MPD released limited body camera video of the incident. 6 months later, the Hennepin County attorney said he would not be filing charges in the shooting, citing a BCA investigation which produced hundreds of hours of body camera footage and other evidence. But today, the Sundbergs say they still haven't seen that evidence for themselves.
Today is actually Tekle's birthday. He would be 22 years old. He should be here celebrating. It's been 16 months. We still have not seen the details and seen all the information, despite trying and to get the information.
The Sundbergs are now among 5 families suing the BCA, alleging they are violating the Minnesota Data Practices Act for not releasing investigatory files from cases that have been closed.
Once the county attorneys decided not to charge the officers involved, that data became public. And at that point, it should be provided to the families upon request. The law says within 10 days.
Many of the families that I'm standing here with are just looking for the answers, and we can't get those answers or that closure until the BCA really comes through and fulfills their obligations.
We've heard all sorts of explanations about how there's just too much work to do. They've apparently hired several more attorneys to do review in the last year. They had to train those people. That is not our concern. We have families who are entitled to this data.
If you got some data out there about somebody who's dead and certain relatives want access to it, they ought to get access.
Don Gemberling is an expert and former law enforcement trainer on compliance with the Minnesota Data Practices Act. He says the 10-day window to gain access does apply to a so-called representative of the decedent, which includes a victim's spouse and children, or if there are none, the parents.
I was the primary trainer for these people for years. I probably trained 40,000 law enforcement personnel. And on this particular issue, I would always tell them the same thing. If somebody shows up at your door and says, I'm a data subject, or in this case, the representative of a decedent, and I want access to the data about this person, you're supposed to give them access within 10 days.
We would certainly, for the families, like the full unredacted files. But at this point, we'd settle for the public version of the files. These haven't been released in any of these cases, despite the fact they are overdue.
And in some cases, they say the delays include more than just data and video.
The BCA still has his personal belongings. So that is something that I would like. My son had a class ring, he had a watch, he had bracelets, he had things that are very personal to us, and I still haven't received those.
Now, in just the last half hour, a spokesperson for the BCA sent us this statement saying once a case is closed, the BCA must review every report, image, audio, and video in the case file to ensure that information that isn't public is removed as required under Minnesota law. This requires review of dash camera, body-worn camera, and surveillance video, all other images and audio of the incident, and voluminous reports. Now, the BCA is committed, they say, to providing information to families and the public as quickly as possible while ensuring the protection of information that we cannot release under Minnesota law. But again, the attorney for these families says regardless of the reasoning for the delay, they believe the data practices law makes it clear that they have 10 days to get these families the information promised to them. especially since their window to file a wrongful death lawsuit is limited, Jana, to 3 years. For some of these families, that window will soon close.
And it seems like trying to figure this out between the BCA and the family's lawyer wasn't working. So a judge will finally get to weigh in. So a third party.
Yeah, Don said he's actually really fascinated to see where this goes and what a judge has to say about this, because as he said, he's talked about this for decades, but he hasn't seen a case quite like this before.
All right, thanks so much.